I'm Liz, and by some twist of fate, I'm married to the most amazing guy I've ever met, Alex. We're both 28, got our own place, pay our bills, and live a life that's ours. It's been a year since we said I do, and honestly, life's been good, except for one little thing: Alex's parents. Now, don't get me wrong, I never expected to be the daughter-in-law in shining armor, but I also didn't expect to be the family's unwanted guest. The day I met my in-laws, it felt like walking into a lion's den with a stake tied to my neck. My mother-in-law, Jane, had this way of looking at me, like she was trying to figure out if I was more of a nuisance or just plain boring. I could tell she had sized me up and found me lacking before I even had a chance to say hello. Alex had warned me about his mom. "She can be a bit much," he said, as we drove to their place that first time. "But don't take it to heart, okay?" I didn't. Or at least I tried not to. At dinner, I was passing the salt when Jane said, "You know, Stephanie used to cook such wonderful meals. Remember that risotto, honey?" She said to Alex, who just nodded, his jaw tight. "Yeah, I remember," he replied, not looking at me. I sat there, salt shaker in hand, feeling like I was invisible. They all talked about Stephanie as if I wasn't there. I felt a pang in my chest, but I swallowed it down with a smile. "Sounds like she was a great cook," I said, trying to seem unaffected. Jane's eyes met mine, and she smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, she was. She was a lot of things." That night, I told Alex how I felt. It's like she's measuring me against some ghost. Alex hugged me close. "You're the one I chose, Liz. That's all that matters." I wanted to believe him, but as I'd learned, Jane had a long game in mind, and I was the pawn she was eager to sacrifice. I just didn't know it yet. Living with an allergy isn't just inconvenient, it's like having a shadow that's constantly whispering danger in your ear. Since I was a kid, peanuts have been my arch nemesis. It started with a spoonful of peanut paste and a trip to the emergency room that left my parents with a crystal clear message. Keep her away from peanuts and a whole host of other foods if you want her to grow up. It's not just peanuts, though. Soy, peas, cherries, almonds, tomatoes, apricots, bananas, and even potatoes, they're all off limits. It's a list that makes waiters raise an eyebrow and friends hesitate to invite me over for dinner. It's also a list that my mother-in-law, Jane, knows by heart, yet she somehow manages to question every single time we're over for dinner. "Are you sure you can't even have a little bit of this pie? It's got almond extract," she'd ask, with a tone that hovered between concern and disbelief. I would smile politely, though I'd rather not, and say, "Yeah, I'm sure. Thanks, though." It was the same dance every time. I remember once, at a family gathering, I was navigating the buffet, a mental checklist running through my head. Alex was by my side, plate in hand, trying to help me find something safe to eat. That's when Jane swooped in, her voice sickly sweet. "Liz, you must try this casserole. I made sure it was Liz-friendly," she announced, but the glint in her eye didn't match her nurturing words. Alex paused, his fork mid-air. "Mom, you used cream of mushroom soup in this, right?" he asked, knowing full well that many brands included soy, a big no-no for me. Jane's smile faltered for a second. "Oh, I think so. It should be fine." But it wasn't fine, and we both knew it. We made our excuses, me leaving the casserole untouched. But the incident stuck with me. It was a small victory in what felt like an ongoing battle, a battle where Jane held all the cards because she controlled the kitchen. I've learned to navigate this world with careful steps. Eating out is a strategic operation. Alex and I were at our favorite Italian place, a rare find that understood the gravity of food allergies. I'd recited my usual spiel to the waiter, who nodded understandingly. Alex watched me with those soft eyes of his, the ones that said he'd do anything to make my life easier. "You okay?" he asked, after the waiter left. "Yeah, I'm fine. I just hate making a fuss," I replied, folding my napkin on my lap. "You're not making a fuss. You're making sure you don't, die," he said, half joking, half serious. I laughed, a short, grateful sound. "Well, when you put it that way..." After dinner, as we walked under the clear night sky, I felt light, happy. That's when my phone buzzed with a text from Jane. Her words were like a cloud over the moon, darkening the moment. Be careful, Liz. Not everyone takes your condition seriously. Wouldn't want anything to happen to you. I read the text to Alex, who wrapped an arm around me, pulling me close. She's just trying to get to you, he said. But as much as I wanted to shrug it off, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jane's message was more than just a jab. It was a warning, a reminder that my allergy made me vulnerable, not just to food, but to people like her, who saw it as a weakness to be exploited. The rest of the walk home, I couldn't help but think about all the close calls, all the accidental exposures, and how easily something could go wrong. It wasn't just the peanuts, or the soy, or the peas. It was the realization that my allergy was more than a personal battle. It was a chink in my armor that someone like Jane could see as an opportunity. And that thought was scarier than any allergic reaction I'd ever had. Dinners at Jane's house were always a production, like a play where everyone knew their parts except me. I was the wild card, the one who could unintentionally cause a scene with a single bite. Alex tried to make it better, but there's only so much you can do when you're playing in someone else's home court. One particular evening, the tension was as thick as the gravy on the table. Jane was bustling around, placing dish after dish on the table. I sat there, my own plate empty, waiting to figure out what I could eat without a trip to the hospital. Alex, darling, pass the green beans to Liz. They're just divine, Jane said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that didn't reach her eyes. I eyed the beans, but something seemed off. What's in them? I asked. Oh, just a touch of almond slivers for crunch, she said, waving a hand dismissively. I put my hand up, stopping Alex's reach. I can't eat those, remember? Almonds are a no-go for me. Jane feigned surprise, a hand to her chest. Oh dear, I must have forgotten. Silly me. Alex's chair scraped back as he stood up. Mom, this is serious. Liz could end up in the hospital. His voice was firm, edged with a frustration that made Jane's eyes narrow just a little. I just wanted to make something nice, she said. It's not my fault Liz has all these allergies. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. The other relatives glanced around, forks paused midair, not sure where to look. I felt a flush creeping up my neck, embarrassed by the spotlight. Alex's dad, Mark, tried to break the tension. Let's just enjoy the meal, shall we? There's plenty Liz can eat. But the damage was done. The rest of the dinner passed in strained politeness, with Jane asking pointed questions about my allergies, as if she were taking notes for next time. Later, when Alex and I were alone, he apologized. I'm sorry, Liz. I should have double-checked everything before we came. I shook my head, tired of feeling like a problem to be managed. It's not your fault, but I'm starting to think your mom does these things on purpose. He didn't answer, and he didn't need to. We both knew the truth. Jane was serving up a side of malice with every meal, and I was the main course. I could always tell when Jane had been working on Alex. He'd get this distant look in his eyes, like he was seeing me, but also seeing through me, weighing her words against his own judgment. This particular evening, it was like a cloud had settled over him, and I knew it before he even said a word. Mom thinks we should consider... Well, she thinks we might not be thinking about the future enough, Alex muttered, not meeting my eye as he fumbled with the TV remote. The future? I asked, a sinking feeling in my gut. Yeah, kids and your health issues, he continued, the word issues hanging awkwardly in the air between us. I felt a tightness in my chest. She talked to you about my allergies again, didn't she? He sighed, setting the remote down. She's just worried, Liz. She thinks it's a lot for us to handle, especially if we want a family. I bristled. We've talked about this. I've managed so far, haven't I? And there are plenty of people with allergies who have kids. Alex ran a hand through his hair, a sure sign he was stressed. I know. It's just... She has this way of making me doubt things. The room was quiet for a moment, the tension thick. I watched him, this man I loved, wrestling with the seeds of doubt his mother had planted. Alex, do you doubt us? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. No. He looked up, finally, his eyes clear and firm. No, I don't. I just hate that she keeps bringing it up. I hate that it makes us fight. I reached for his hand, our fingers intertwining. "We're not fighting. We're on the same side, remember?" He nodded, pulling me into a hug. "You and me against the world, right?" "Right," I said, but as I held him, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jane's words were like weeds, threatening to grow wild and choke the life out of the beautiful thing we had. And I knew then that it wasn't just my allergies that needed managing. It was the doubts that could seep into the cracks of even the strongest relationships. The news of my pregnancy came as a surprise, a happy one for Alex and me, a complicated one for everyone else. The day we announced it to his parents, Jane's reaction was like watching a robot trying to mimic human emotions. A pause, then a smile that didn't quite match the situation. "We're going to have a baby, Mom," Alex said, his voice a mix of pride and caution as he gauged his mother's reaction. "That's wonderful," Jane managed to say, the words sounding foreign in her mouth. "We must have a family dinner to celebrate." I was skeptical. Celebrations at Jane's were never just celebrations, but I saw the hopeful look in Alex's eyes and agreed. The night of the dinner, the house was buzzing with relatives. Jane was the perfect hostess, floating from guest to guest with a grace that felt almost genuine. When she reached us, her smile was practiced. "Congratulations, Liz," she said. "This is such a joyous occasion." "Thank you, Jane," I replied, trying to match her formality. "We're excited." Alex wrapped his arm around my waist, a silent thank you for playing along. As dinner approached, I felt the familiar anxiety. A table full of food was a minefield for me, but tonight, I hoped, would be different. The table was a feast, dishes upon dishes laid out, and I felt every eye on me as I hesitated, my hand hovering over the options. "Go on, dear," Jane urged. "Eat up. You're eating for two now." I smiled weakly, choosing the safest options, vegetables and rice, plain and simple. But as I reached for a slice of bread, Jane stopped me. "Actually, maybe not that one," she said quickly. "I'm not sure if the baker used soy flour." I paused, bread in hand, and met her gaze. There was a flicker of something there. Concern, or was it a challenge? "Thank you for letting me know," I said, putting the bread down. But the warning bells were already ringing in my head. How did she know about the soy flour? It seemed too close a call, too perfect a save. The rest of the meal passed in a blur, congratulations mingling with the clinking of glasses. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Jane's hospitality was a veneer, and beneath it lay a trap, set and waiting for just the right moment. The family dinner in honor of our future baby was nothing short of a banquet. Jane had outdone herself, and there was a spread that would make a Thanksgiving dinner look modest. But my stomach was in knots, not from hunger, but from fear. Every dish was a potential hazard, a hidden enemy that could send me to the hospital, or worse. As we all took our seats, the chatter around the table was lively, filled with the usual family gossip and stories. Jane was at the head of the table, presiding over the feast like a queen in her court. She called everyone to attention with a gentle tap of her glass. "Before we begin, I just want to say how thrilled we are to be celebrating Liz and Alex's upcoming addition to our family," Jane announced, her voice steady and clear. There was a round of hear, hear, and applause. I forced a smile, feeling Alex squeeze my hand under the table. "Thank you, everyone," I said. "We're really looking forward to this new chapter in our lives." The meal began, and I tentatively picked at my food, choosing the simplest items. Alex watched me, his brow furrowed with concern. "You doing okay?" he asked quietly. "Yeah, just being careful," I replied, pushing a roasted potato around my plate. Jane's eyes were on me, and I felt like a specimen under a microscope. "Liz, you haven't touched your salad. The dressing is on the side, just as you like it," she said, her voice tinged with a forced cheerfulness. "Thank you, Jane. I'm just not much of an appetite tonight," I said, avoiding the salad that I knew could easily contain hidden allergens. As the dinner wore on, the tension grew. Every time Jane offered me something, my anxiety spiked. The room felt hot, the walls inching closer with each passing minute. Then came the cake. It was a beautiful confection, layers of sponge and cream that made the room ooh and ah. Jane cut a slice and handed it to me with a smile that might have been genuine if I hadn't known better. "For the mom-to-be," she said. I looked at the cake, then at Alex, then at Jane. "I really shouldn't," I said, "but it looks delicious." "Oh, come on, Liz. One little bite won't hurt. For the baby," Jane pressed, her voice sweet as the icing. That's when Alex's dad, Mark, stepped in, his hand swift as he knocked the plate from my hands. The cake tumbled to the floor, and a stunned silence fell over the room. "What the hell, Dad?" Alex exclaimed, his voice a mix of anger and confusion. Mark stood, his face pale but his voice firm. "I saw the label in the trash. That cake has peanut oil in it." The room erupted in chaos. Jane's face was the picture of shock, but her eyes gave her away. There was a flash of something there. Fear, maybe? Guilt? Alex stood, his chair clattering behind him. "Mom, did you know about this?" he demanded. Jane's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. And in that moment, the truth was as clear as the danger that had been on my plate. The room was dead silent after Mark's revelation, the dropped cake like a crime scene on the hardwood floor. Everyone's eyes were locked on Jane, who seemed to shrink under the collective gaze. "Mom, is it true? Did you know?" Alex's voice cut through the tension, sharp and demanding. Jane's eyes flickered with something dark before she regained her composure. "Of course not. I would never." Her voice trailed off, unconvincing. Mark wasn't having any of it. "I saw the shopping list, Jane. Peanut oil for cake. It was right there, in your handwriting," he said, his voice steady but laced with disappointment. The murmurs around the table grew louder, a mix of disbelief and anger bubbling up from the family. Alex was shaking his head, his hands balled into fists. "How could you, Mom? Liz could have died." I was frozen in my seat, the gravity of the situation anchoring me down. This wasn't just carelessness or forgetfulness, it was intentional. Jane's mask finally slipped, her face twisted in anger. "I didn't want it to come to this, but she's not right for you, Alex. She's weak, and now she's bringing a child into this world who will be just like her." Alex took a step toward his mother, incredulous. "Weak? Liz is the strongest person I know. And you? How could you be so cruel?" I could feel the eyes on me, waiting for me to break down, to crumble under the weight of Jane's words. But I didn't. "Jane," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, "you've made your feelings very clear. But this is not just about me. This is about a family, your grandchild." Jane looked away, her jaw clenched, and for the first time, I saw the hint of fear in her eyes. Maybe she realized that her actions hadn't just endangered me, but her relationship with her son, her reputation, everything. The rest of the evening was a blur. There were arguments, tears, and hushed conversations as the family tried to process what had happened. Alex and I left early, the weight of the evening heavy on our shoulders. We didn't speak much on the drive home. What was there to say? The truth was out, and with it, the facade of a polite, if not happy family was shattered. All because of a peanut. The drive home was quiet, the kind of silence that's heavy, filled with things unsaid. When we finally walked through our front door, Alex and I just stood there, the echo of the night's drama still ringing in our ears. Alex was the first to break the silence. "I can't believe my own mother would do something like that," he said, his voice hollow. I sat down on the couch, the cushion failing to comfort me. "I know. It's a lot to take in." He sat beside me, taking my hands in his. "I'm so sorry, Liz. It's unforgivable." I looked at him, seeing the pain in his eyes, and my heart ached. "It's not your fault, Alex. We couldn't have known she'd go this far." But the truth was there, hanging between us. Jane had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The family was in pieces. Some stood by us, shocked and appalled by Jane's actions, while others struggled to wrap their heads around the reality of the situation. The next few days were a whirlwind. Alex's phone buzzed constantly with messages and calls. Relatives wanted to express their shock, their support, their apologies. And through it all, there was a deafening silence from Jane. No apologies, no explanations, nothing. Alex finally broke the news to me a week later. Dad's left her. He can't get past what she did. He said it's been a long time coming. I wasn't sure how to feel. Relief, sadness, pity? And Jane? I asked tentatively. He said she's not handling it well. She's alone now, Alex replied, a twinge of something like regret in his tone. We sat in our living room, the walls we'd painted together, the furniture we'd picked out during countless trips to the store. It was our home, filled with our memories, our love. And outside, there was a storm brewing, one that threatened to uproot everything we knew. But in that moment, I realized that no matter what happened, we had each other. We were a team, about to bring a new life into the world, and that was what mattered. I love you, Liz, Alex said, pulling me close. I love you too, I whispered back. The fallout from that night would linger. The scars it left on our family would take time to heal. But as I looked at Alex, at the life we'd built, and the future we were about to embark on, I knew that we'd weather any storm together. And as for Jane, she was a chapter in our lives that we had closed, a story that we wouldn't let define us. From now on, it was just us, our baby, and the road ahead. Whatever it brought, we'd face it together.
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread. hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.